Ms. Andexser for the Canadian Alliance of British Pensioners.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all committee members for the opportunity to address you today. I am sure many of you are wondering why I have been given the opportunity to speak to a committee formed to discuss future trade agreements between the UK and Canada. I hope in the next few minutes to clearly explain why we feel there is an important connection. I may be one voice, but I say we because I speak on behalf of approximately 136,000 British pensioners who have chosen Canada as their home in retirement. The vast majority of these people, like me, emigrated many years ago in response to Canada's request for certain skilled labor, such as nurses, teachers, firefighters, and tradespeople for the booming oil industry in the 1970s. Others came to Canada after working all their lives in the UK to be with family members who had already emigrated. Before leaving the UK, we worked and we paid mandatory contributions into the British State Pension Scheme, which is the equivalent of CPP, assuming that upon retirement, we would be treated equally with all British pensioners residing around the world. However, we are not treated equally because we have chosen to live in Canada, and indeed, nor are pensioners in most Commonwealth countries, resulting in almost 500,000 pensioners never receiving the annual uprating in their British pensions. We are known as frozen pensioners. You may ask why. One answer is that the UK has continuously refused requests from Canada's officials to sign a reciprocal agreement to stop this discrimination. They argue that pension increases are to take into account inflation in the UK, but they ignore the fact that they already index pensions for 500,000 expats overseas in many countries, including just to the south of us, the United States. A recent UK House of Commons briefing paper covering frozen overseas pensions states that the unfreezing of British pensions in Canada did not arise during negotiation of a social security agreement with Canada in 1959. This is not surprising. The pension payable overseas was only introduced in 1946, and movement around the world was in its infancy. There were very few people affected in 1959, but here we are 61 years later, and the UK still clings to this piece of history. As more people started to be affected during the high inflation days of the 1960s, more and more United Kingdom MPs began to receive correspondence from pensioners abroad protesting the unfairness of the freezing policy. This protest has magnified over the years as travel around the globe has exploded. Let me give you a couple of examples of the impact of this policy here in Canada. 95-year-old Peter Duffy from Vancouver lives only 300 yards from the USA border. He worked for 40 years in the UK. He flew bombers in the Second World War, and he still receives £52 per week, as he has done for 30 years. But a similar individual in the USA is paid £134. Anne Puckridge, 95, of Calgary, also a war veteran, receives only £72 a week instead of £134. Both of these seniors have been cheated out of thousands of pounds of their rightful pension, and the same is true of countless others of the 136,000 frozen pensioners in Canada. The standard boilerplate response we receive from the UK is that this is a policy that has been continued by successive governments for many years. But history doesn't mean something is right. What was applicable 70 years ago isn't in today's world. If something is morally wrong, it is wrong, plain and simple. Some years ago, our association joined forces with a similar group in Australia to begin a consolidated approach to seek justice, and the International Consortium of British Pensioners now advocates on behalf of frozen pensioners everywhere in the world. Only 2 months ago, Sir Roger Gale, a Conservative MP in the United Kingdom for 38 years and chairman of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Frozen Pensions, released a report that was extremely critical of his own government for perpetuating this practice. For decades, the UK has maintained that they are not entering into any new agreements covering frozen pensions. And yet with Brexit, the UK recently signed new pension agreements with 23 countries to ensure uprated pensions continue for all expats in EU countries, as indeed they should. The UK can no longer claim it's not entering into new agreements, and Canada should most certainly be given the opportunity to enter into an updated agreement under the current trade negotiation discussions. Earlier this week, Sir Roger Gale invited over 30 MPs from the UK and Canada to discuss ways to advance talks on the frozen pension issue. And a number of Canadian MPs, including Pensions Minister Deb Schultz, suggested that your upcoming trade negotiations would certainly be a good starting point. On behalf of the 136,000 frozen pensioners residing in Canada, we would be extremely grateful if you could raise this issue with your counterparts across the pond. As Canada enters into trade negotiations with the UK, worth an estimated $27 billion annually, there is no better time to have this critical discussion. This policy is estimated to cost the Canadian economy close to $500 million every year, and the onus to support those struggling on a very low income should not fall on the backs of the Canadian taxpayers, as it currently does, through subsidies such as GIS and welfare. One recent High Commissioner to the UK told us that the only thorn in an excellent bilateral relationship was that of frozen pensions in Canada. Surely one would have thought that as a major Commonwealth partner, Canada would have been the last place where this immoral, unjust, and discriminatory practice could have been allowed to perpetuate for so long. I hope that I have demonstrated that the current policy is a cost to Canada and deeply impacts the well-being of many of the most vulnerable in our society. In conclusion, I realize that this issue may not appear to fall within the parameters of normal trade discussions, but now more than ever, your committee is in an excellent bargaining position to demand that the UK quickly respond to the recent official request from Canada to sign a social security agreement. One definition of the word trade is to willingly give things or services and get other things or services in return. We feel that momentum to end this policy is now on our side.
Madame la Présidente, si vous me permettez, la traduction ne fonctionne pas.
Hold for a moment.
C'est revenu.
To end this policy is now on our side. Please use your voices to help us. Thank you, and I would be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Andexser. Appreciate that. On to the